Hello everyone, and welcome to today's lesson on finding all the rational zeros. Now, first thing we have to worry about is the rational zero theorem. Now, this states that if you have a sub n of x of n plus, and then the pattern continues all the way to a sub 1 x of 1 plus a sub 0 has integer coefficients, then every rational zero is found by p divided by q, where p is all the factors of a sub 0 and q is all the factors of a sub n. And now that we fully understand what that means, we are ready to move on. But again, I'm assuming that most of us really don't have a clue as to what that really means. So let's take a second to talk about what this definition actually means in English. Alright, so we take a look at our first example here. Example 1, list all the possible zero factors of the following equation, given f of x is x cubed plus 2x squared minus 11x plus 12. And again, right here, you'll notice that I have identified, again, that wonderful, wonderful mathematical definition that was given in the earlier slide. So now, let's actually translate that into English and identify what that means. Now again, so let me get rid of this. Get rid of all that. And let me get rid of this too. Good. Every good mathematical definition needs to be deleted. Okay, so here we go. Now let's talk about what this definition really means. Okay, so it said P over Q. Okay, where P, whoops, wrong thing. Where P, remember, is the definition of all the factors of the back. So P is the factors of the back. So again, we're looking at 12. So all the factors of 12. So it would be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2. Whoops. Hey. Where's my eraser? Hold on. There we go. So plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, and plus or minus 12. So all the multiples that multiply to give you 12. Okay. Then it says for Q, okay, we're talking about all the multiples of the lead coefficient. Well, now in this case, our lead coefficient, because there wasn't anything there, was 1. So it's plus or minus 1. Okay. So now from here, now that we have all this, let's actually start to work this out. Alright, so I'm going to move these over here. Okay, so to do our possible factors, probably the easiest way to do this, again, is to list all the possible factors on the top over all the possible on the bottom. So again, we're going to do overall, so for factors, I keep hitting the highlighter. Get rid of that. Try this again. So again, our factors, our possible factors, are equal to plus or minus. Again, we're just going to take all these guys on the top here over all these guys on the bottom. So again, so all this over all this. So then once we do that, now we're just dividing it like a normal fraction, seeing what we can reduce and all that other fun stuff. So here, we're going to have 1 over 1. So we can have plus or minus 1. Then you're going to have 2 over 1. So plus or minus 2. 3 over 1, and so on and so forth. So you're going to have plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, and plus or minus 12. So these right here are all our possible factors, and that's easy when our Q value is only 1. Now the harder part comes with this, okay, where our lead term this time, so this guy right here, our Q, is going to have more than one possible factor. Okay, so let's start off. Let's list all the possible factors start with the back here. I'll change to red. Actually, blue. So again, so our p-values, okay, it's going to be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 5. Oops. And plus or minus 10. Okay, because that's what multiplies to give me 10. Now let's do our q values. Okay. So q equals 2. Now in this case we're going to have plus or minus 1, but 4 is also made up of 2, so plus or minus 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. We have plus or minus 4. All right, so we have a longer list this time of possible factors. Okay, so now probably the easiest way to do this, here, let me shrink this down a little bit, move it. There we go. So now when we do this time, we're going to have to be a little more careful. Okay, so our possible factors. Okay, now in this instance, because we have 3 q values here, we're going to set up 3 division lines. Okay, now this first one is going to be plus or minus when our denominator is 1. The second one is when it's going to be plus or minus, and again when the denominator is 2. And the third one is going to be when it's plus or minus and when our denominator is 4. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our p-values again, that's these guys right here, and they go on the top. Whoops. So we do it again. And one more time. Now again, sadly for you, you have to write this out, but I can just copy and paste. And now from here, now is where we're going to start making our list of all the possible factors here by taking the top and dividing it by the bottom. Now the first part's going to be really easy because again, as we saw earlier, in this case 1 over 1 is just 1, so plus or minus 1. 2 over 1 is plus or minus, I forgot the comma, 2. And we're going to have plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10. Okay, but now when it comes to the second one, we're going to have 1 over 2. So plus or minus 1/2. Now here, 2 over 2 is 1. But if you see, let me get my pointer real quick. Okay, but you can see here that I already have 1 listed. So therefore, I don't have to write 2 over 2 because 2 over 2 is 1 and I already have 1. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, oops. So again, 5 over 2, I don't have 5 halves, so plus or minus 5 halves. Oops, forgot the comma in there. And then 10 halves, again, is 5. And again, like I showed you earlier, we already have 5. Okay, we already have 5. It's right here. So I don't have to worry about the 5. So now I can go to my next parenthesis. Okay, so 1 over 4 is 1/4. So plus or minus 1/4. Now 2 over 4, again, we saw earlier, is going to reduce to 1/2. I already have 1/2 right here, so I don't have to list it again. Okay, 5/4 I don't have, so plus or minus 5/4. Okay, then we have 10/4, which reduces to 5/2, and again, I've already got 5/2. It's right here, so I don't have to list it again. So my final answer, all the possible factors are this area right here. So all these are the list of all the possible factors for this problem. All right. Now for this next one, I'm going to let you try this on your own for a little bit. And again, I'll give you about a minute or so to try this out on your own. So try this, and I'll come back to you in a minute, and we'll get started on this one. Again, you don't need to pause the video. Again, I'll just let the clock run. So again, you work on this, and when 1 minute is up, you'll hear my voice again. All right, so it's been about a minute, so let's come back and talk about this. Now again, first thing we have to get is our P's and our Q's. So again, start off with our P values. Okay, so that'll be the guys right in the back right here. So our P values are going to be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6. Now our Q values in this case are going to be the multiples of 2. So Q plus or minus 1 plus or minus 2. All right, so there's our values. Okay. So I'm just going to shrink this down a little bit, move it. All right, so now let's start our lists here. Now again, our possible factors. Now we're going to have 2 this time. So when it's over 1, that's this guy. And then when it's over 2, that's the guy right there. So again, and for the top of those fractions, all we're going to do is select the p-values. And we'll do it again. Now again, sadly for you, you have to write it. I can just copy. So it looks like that. All right, so now let's do this up. So our factors. So we're going to start off. We have 1 over 1, so plus or minus. We have 1 over 1, so 1. Plus or minus, we have 2 over 1, which is 2. Plus or minus 3 over 1, which is just 3, plus or minus 6 for this one right here. So now for the bottom half, plus or minus, so 1 over 2 is 1/2. That's this guy right here. Now 2 over 2, again, reduces to 1, and I already have 1. 1 is right here, so I don't have to do that again. Okay. So continuing on, we have 3 over 2. So 3 over 2. And then we have 6 over 2, which we reduce to 3, which, again, I have right here. All right. So again, finish it up by listing all your possible factors is this area right here. Oh, I didn't have to have that plus or minus there, did I? Silly me. Well, let me get my eraser. There we go. All right, that's better. So now let's just finish up our box, and there it is, piece of cake. All right. All right, I'll let you try this next one. Again, list all the possible factors. I will give you a minute, so again, you can run the video. Okay, and I will let the video go, and in a minute I'll come back and we'll talk about how we did this one. All right, everybody, I'm back. So let's take a look. All right, so let's get our P's and Q's. All right, so right here is my p-values. So my p's are equal to plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6. All right, my q values. Again, I can't see a number in front of the cube, so that's a 1. So my q value, plus or minus 1. Perfect, that's going to make our lives a lot easier. All right, let me shrink this and move it. All right, so let's go list our possible factors. So factors. Okay, so we're only going to have one fraction, plus or minus, because we only have one q value. So again, the p-values go all on top, so let me grab a copy of this, and you have to write it, sorry. Boom. All right, so let's list our possible factors. So we're going to do plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, and plus or minus 6. And there's all your possible factors. All right, again, try another one. List all the possible factors here. This one's going to be a little bit harder, a lot more fractions, but that's okay. You guys love fractions anyway. So again, I'll give you about a minute to try this. Leave the video running, and again, I will come back in a minute and we'll talk about this problem. Alrighty, folks, we're back. So let's take a quick peek at how you have done. Again, if you're still working, that's perfectly fine. All right, so again, let's start off by listing our p's and q's. So my p values are going to be right here. So p is equal to plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9. My q values are going to be off of the 5. So q is equal to plus or minus 1 and plus or minus 5. All right, wonderful. So that's what we got. I'm going to shrink this down and move it. Boom. All right, so let's start with our possible factors here. So our factors is equal to. Now again, we've got two q values. So we're going to have two fractions, plus or minus, plus or minus. Whoops, that was awful. Where'd my eraser go? There it is. There we go. That's been, I'll get rid of that too, that looks gross. All right, so let's try this again. Plus or minus, and then we're gonna have a 1 under this one, and a 5 under this one. All right, so here we go. Let's grab our p-values and put those on top. So here we go. Just drag that over. And I'll do it again for the second one. All right, so now let's list off our possible factors. So we're going to have, easily off of this one, we're going to have plus or minus for this first set. We're going to have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9. Now for the second parenthesis, we're going to have plus or minus 1/5. We're going to have plus or minus 3/5, plus or minus 9/5. No reducing we could do on this one. And here it is, all said and done. All right, now before we go forward in doing the next thing, we have to take a step back and review synthetic division, because you're going to need synthetic division for this next part. All right, so we're asked to factor completely. We're asked to factor this using synthetic division. But nicely enough for us, they gave us one of the factors. They gave us x minus 6. Okay? Now remember, the first thing we have to do when doing synthetic division is we have to remember to check for our gaps. Remember, gaps, we're looking for, we count down the exponents here. There should be a 1 here. Okay, it should count down perfectly. See, 3, 2, 1, and then nothing. If there's a hole, that means your countdown will not be perfect, in which means you have to fill in a coefficient of 0. Okay, now like I said, in this case, we have everything we need. Okay, so I'm going to erase all that. Okay, all right, so here we go. We're ready to go. So let's grab the coefficients. So again, the number in front of the x cubed is a 1. We're going to have negative 10. We're going to have 19. We're going to have 30. Okay, and now notice we have, this is where we put our little box. Now again, they tell us that x minus 6 was our divisor. X minus 6 equals 0. Remember, we have to set it to 0 to determine what put in the box. Therefore, x is equal to 6 if we solve that equation. So the 6 is what goes in the box. Okay, very important. Now, we do our dividing line here, our separation line here. Now remember, we're going to send the first number over, so the 1's going to easily come over. And what we're going to do is we're going to ricochet multiply. Remember, we're going to take the 6, we're going to times it by the 1, and then when we get our answer, we send it underneath, it ricochets underneath to the next number. So in this case, 6 times 1 is 6. So we put it here, and then we're going to add down. Okay, so negative 10 plus 6 is negative 4. Okay, then we start the ricochet again. So again, we're going to go 6 times negative 4, which is negative 24. Okay, and again, we are going to add down. So when I do that, I'm going to get negative 5. Okay, then we're going to do it again. So we're going to take the 6 times the negative 5, and that gives me negative 30, which when I add down gives me 0. Now remember, when you are asked to factor, okay, very important that the remainder has to be 0. Remember, this component right here is the remainder. In order for it to be a true factor, the remainder has to be 0. So that's perfect. That's what we want. Now the second component of synthetic, is, at least when we have done this before, is once we've gotten it to where we have 3 numbers and the remainder. Remember, this is the remainder. This is x to the 0, or what we call the constant. This is x to the first and x squared. So we're going to take this out of synthetic division and put it into a form that we're more familiar with looking at in terms of factoring. So this is going to be x squared minus 4x minus 5. Okay. And now at this point, we also have to remember we had the x minus 6 in the beginning. Okay. So now, at this point, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so we can have plenty of room. Okay, so I'm going to kind of reset this a little bit here. Okay, so we now have x minus 6 with our x squared minus 4x minus 5. Okay, now this right here, this piece right here, we can factor this. That's the whole point. We know how to factor this using either the PS2 or the slide, something like that. So at this point, let's factor this using PS2. So my product is negative 5. My sum is going to be negative 4. So the two numbers that multiply to negative 5, or multiply to 5, but subtract to negative 4 is negative 5 and positive 1. Okay, so I gotta shrink this some more. Okay, so now we're going to finish this thing up now. Okay, so again, this x minus 6 follows us along because I couldn't factor that anymore. So x minus 6. Then the other two pieces go in the parentheses. We're going to have x minus 5, and we're going to have x plus 1, and we have finished our factoring. Okay? All right, so we'll get another one. All right, so again, factor completely. Okay, we're given this. Now notice, first thing I see here is I check for gaps. Now I go from x cubed to x to the first to x to no x's. Now I went from 3 to 1 to 0, which tells me there's a gap in here, and it's where the x squared should be. So that coefficient I have to fill within a 0. So this problem should now read x cubed plus 0x squared, eraser. So minus 7x plus 3. That's how this problem should read, and we're going to divide it by the x plus 1. So now that I've got my gap filled, because I now can go 3, 2, 1, 0. So let's get the coefficients 1, 0, negative 7, 3. Okay, now for our box. Now again, we're dividing by x plus 1. So x plus 1 is equal to 0. So x equals negative 1. So negative 1 goes in the box. There's our dividing line. Okay, so now first thing we're going to do is we're going to send the 1 across the line. And we're going to start ricochet multiplying. So negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Okay, we're going to add down. So 0 minus 1 is negative 1. Okay, then we're going to ricochet multiply again. So negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. That gives me negative 6. Okay, and we continue on in this case. Now we're going to notice here this time, when I do negative 1 times negative 6, I get positive 6, which gives me positive 9. Now again, here's our problem. In order to factor this properly, remember, this remainder must be 0, which means in this case, this one is not factorable by x plus 1. So now before, when we were looking at synthetic division before, we would leave this. We would say, yeah, oh, this is easy. I got my remainder. This is x to the 0, x to the first, x to the first, x squared. So we would just say, hey, yeah, this is easy. X squared minus x minus 6 plus our remainder of 9 over the divisor of x plus 1. Okay, if we were just dividing this. Now, in this case, because the direction said to factor, we can't factor this given just x plus 1. So we would be done. Now, that was before. But now, since I've taught you how to find all the possible factors, here's where this lesson's going to get really interesting and fun for you. because now we're going to pull this all together. We're going to find all the zeros, and we're going to solve, and we're going to do all sorts of really fun things. All right. One of the big key features that you're going to have to know in this unit is the fundamental theorem of algebra. Now this theorem says, now again, like you saw earlier, there's a lot of drawn out mathematical definitions, but what it basically tells us is the largest exponent we have in the problem tells me how many answers we should have in our problem. So if my lead variable is x to the 6th, this tells me I should have 6 solutions. Okay, if I add an x to the 4th, this tells me I should have 4 solutions. And so on and so forth. So if I had x to the 37th as my lead exponent, that tells me that there should be 37 solutions to this problem. Okay, now granted, we're not going to go as crazy as x to the 37th, but it could get that fun for you. All right, so now what I'm going to do is let's go through all the steps that you're going to need in order to find all the zeros every time. Okay, so first thing we have to do is find all the possible zero factors. So that's what we did earlier on. That's the P over Q stuff, okay, that we did earlier in the video. Okay, so that's all that. That's pretty easy. Step 2, set the equation up in synthetic division, and don't forget to fill the gaps. So the review of synthetic division, again, we're going to be using synthetic division to help us get through and find as many of the solutions as we can as fast as we can. But this does get messy. Number 3, use synthetic division to find a factor when you have a remainder of 0. So again, we're going to run this through, and our goal at the end is we're going to try to have a remainder of 0 so we can break these things down further and further. We're going to repeat this third step until we're in the x squared range. So like I talked about earlier, we try to get it down to 3 numbers and the remainder left, because at that point we're down to x squared, and we know how to factor x squared by using either PS2, the slide, difference of squares, that kind of fun stuff. Then we're going to factor that remaining problem. So again, like we did earlier, we're going to, break the x squared down into its prime pieces. And then we're going to solve all the pieces and list the solution. Okay, so those are our 6 steps that we're going to use to solve these types of problems. All right, so let's take a look at our first example here. And again, I've put the steps on the side so we can kind of follow those along and keep going with what we have. Okay. So first thing we have to do is list all the possible 0 factors here. Okay, so again, that's the P over Q stuff that we did earlier. So again, eraser. Here we go. All right, so we start with the P over Q. So here's our P, so we list all those factors. So plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10, and plus or minus 20. Kind of run out of room. Then we'll do the Q values. So we have 2 of them. So we have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2. Okay, so by listing our factors, okay, so we're going to have 2 fractions. Okay. Let's see if I can shrink this a little bit. Oh, perfect. Okay. Now again, our possible factors are when Q is 1, Q is 2. And again, we have the fun task. We have to copy all these fun ones up here. Okay. Didn't fit very well. Shrink it down. There we go. And we'll do it again. See, you have to write it out. Sorry. One of the perks of using this, I guess. All right. So now, let's get our factors. So again, we're going to do the 1 over 1, 2 over 1. So we're going to have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10, plus or minus 20. On the second piece, we have 1/2, plus or minus 1, which we already have. 4 over 2 is 2, which I already have. We're going to have 5/2. Okay, we're going to have 10 over 2, which is 5, and 20 over 2, which is 10 I have. So here's all my possible factors. Wonderful. So, step 1, done. Okay, now we're going to go to step 2. It says we're going to set this up for synthetic division. Okay, so let me erase all the fun stuff we did on this so I can see everything here. Because remember, with synthetic division, first thing I have to check for is gaps. So look at the exponents. I have 3, 2, 1, 0. So no gaps. So I'm going to grab the coefficients. Okay, so do kind of like a separating line here. So we're going to have the 2. We're going to have the 1, because there's a 1 in front of the x squared. We have negative 41 and 20. Now, here's where the aggravating part comes in. I'm going to shrink this a little bit. Because now, before we said, oh yeah, we're going to give you one of the factors, so, you know, it's divisible by this. We're not going to do that anymore. So now you have the fun task of trying to figure out which ones work. I know, so exciting. I can hear you moaning and complaining already. So what I would recommend doing is starting simple. Start with the possible factors that are nice numbers. Okay? Now again, you're going to have to pick. So let's start with a 2. Let's do a positive 2. Now when I do these, okay, put 2 in the box. When I pick a number, typically what I'm going to do is, if one of them works, great, we'll reassess our possible factors. If it doesn't work, okay, we'll try the negative number and see if that'll come out. All right, so let's get started here. We're going to do 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Add down, I get 5. 2 times 5 is 10. So I'm going to get negative 31. 2 times negative 31 is negative 62, and if I add down, I get negative 42. Now remember, the key is the remainder has to be 0, which tells me in this case that negative 2, or correction, positive 2, is not a factor, which means for you, you now have the fun task of you have to erase all this. Now for me, it's going to be easy because I can just do this. You have the fun task of erasing all that, and then you get to pick again. Now, I wish I knew a better way, but sadly I do not. But this also tells me that positive 2 is not a factor. So let's go to negative 2 and see what happens. All right, so negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. Add down is negative 3. Negative 2 times negative 3 is 6. Adding down, that's going to be negative 35. Negative 35 times negative 2 is positive 70. That gives me 90. All right. Now, again, I did not get a remainder of 0. So that tells me this doesn't work. So 2 is not a factor of this thing at all, positive or negative. So again, you're going to have to erase all this. Okay. And then we pick another number. Hey, I'll have to go to the next eraser. There we go. Okay. So now we have to go to something else now. So we can't use 2. 2 is not a factor. Okay, so now we're going to pick a different number. Let's do positive 4. Okay, so positive 4 goes in the box. Let's multiply. 4 times 2 is 8. Add down and get 9. 9 times 4 is 36. Add down, you get negative 5. 4 times negative 5 is negative 20, which gives me a 0. So we have a winner. We have one. So that tells me 4 is a solution, okay, because I got a remainder of 0. Now at this point, now we're going to start taking a look at this. Now remainder, and I've got x to the 0, x to the first, x squared. So this tells me I can now take this out of synthetic division and playing this horrible guessing game and factor it, something we should be very good at now. So this is going to be 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. Okay, so now we're going to use the slide on this. Okay, slide method, I multiply front to back, negative 10. All right, so we do negative 10. So now we do our mini PS2 here. So my product is going to be negative 10. The sum is going to be positive 9. So the two numbers that do this are going to be obviously positive 10, negative 1. Okay, I got to shrink this down some more. So now, so let's go back, and we're going to do our x plus 10, x minus 1. But don't forget, since we did the slide, I have to divide by that lead coefficient. So now I'm going to have x plus 5 and x minus a half. But now, if you remember the steps, okay, we are now trying to solve these. We're not factoring, we are solving this. By listing all the zeros, you are solving. Okay, so now we're going to solve this. So if I do x plus 5 is equal to 0, x is negative 5. If x minus a half equals 0, x is 1/2. And we have one more solution to list. The 4 from the synthetic division. So x also equals to 4. And here are all the possible zeros that make this problem work. Okay? It's a lot of fun, I know. All right, let's look at the next one. All right, now this one's going to be even more fun because we're going to have to do synthetic division twice this time. Okay, oh, I know, I can hear you complaining already. But that's okay. This won't be that bad. All right, so again, first thing we do, let's get our P's and Q's. Okay, so possible factors of 24. So plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6. I'm going to have to plus or minus 8, plus or minus 12, plus or minus 24. That one's going to be a fun one. And then our Q's, luckily for us, our Q value is just going to be 1, so plus or minus 1. So I'm going to do my possible factors here. Okay, so we're going to do only one fraction over 1, plus or minus. And we have the fun task that we have to put all those on here. So you get to write all those down. And I'm just going to copy and paste and drag it down. And I'm going to minimize it so it looks better. There. So our possible factors off of this beast are just the guys on the top here. So again, if you want to just copy it again, you can. Just going to be plus or minus 1, plus or... Actually, I'm going to move this down a little bit here. Let's do it down here. I'm going to get rid of that. So plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 8, plus or minus 12, plus or minus 24. So here is all our possible factors for this monster. So step 1 is done. Okay, now like I said, steps 2 and 3 and 4 will go pretty quickly. So first thing I'm going to do is minimize this a little bit here. Scooch this up. Okay, and I'm going to kind of erase a little what I did up there so I can see. Because our next step is we're going to set up for synthetic division, but we have to make sure I don't have any gaps. But if you notice, I go from x to the fourth to x squared, which means there's a gap in here. So I have to fill in the cube with a 0. So this problem now reads x to the fourth plus 0x cubed minus 15x squared plus 10x plus 24. Okay, make that plus a little better. All right, so now at this point, let's get the coefficients. So we're going to have a 1, 0, negative 15, a 10, and a 24. All right, and I'm going to move this up a little bit. I'm going to shrink it a smidge, scooch it up. All right, so now let's start with our possible factors here. So again, you can pick in the middle. We got nice numbers here. So let's start with a 2. Let's do a positive 2 here. So let's do 2. Bring down the 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Add down is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So we're going to have negative 11. 2 times negative 11, negative 22. So that's negative 12. 2 times negative 12 is negative 24, which turns into 0. Awesome, we made a lucky guess right off the bat. That's what we want. Now, here's the problem. Looking at my numbers here, here's my remainder. Here's x to the 0. Here's x to the first. Here's x squared. Here's x cubed. We're not in our squared range that we'd like to be in order to factor. So we have to do synthetic division again. So we kind of have to start the process again here. Okay, so here, let me shrink this down. Okay, so let's shrink this down. Oops, too much. And I'm going to move this up. Now, our original possible factors can still help us. Okay, so let's get our possible factors here. Now again, in this case, we ignore the 0. This is my new p. Okay, so my p is going to be negative 12. And our q is still going to be 1. So this time we're going to list all the possible factors of this. So in this case, for my p value, we have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 12. Okay, then we have over 1, which means our possible factors are going to be basically our list of p's. So, because again, they're just going to divide these all by 1. So 1 over 1 is 1. 2 over 1 is 2. 3 over 1 is 3. So what we can do is we go back to our original list of possible values here and see what we have and just cross off what we had that we don't see anymore. So like 24 up here. I don't see that anymore, so I can get rid of that one. It's not a factor anymore. We have 12. We don't have 8 anymore, so I can get rid of that one. 6, we still have 4, we still have 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we only got rid of those 2. So, where's my eraser? There it is. So I'm going to get rid of this. And what I typically like to do when I do synthetic division, have to do it multiple times, is I like to just keep going with what I have here. Okay, so I just pick it up from here. Okay, throw in another box. Okay, and then we're going to start this beast again and try to break this thing down. Okay, so again, looking at my possible factors, let's throw a 3 in there. Again, I'm just guessing here, just like you guys will be. So 1 times 3 is 3, so it's a 5. 3 times 5 is 15. Add down, we get a 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Oh, perfect. 0 again. That's what we want. 0 remainder. So now this time, I have it with my 3 pieces. X squared, x to the first, x 0, remainder. So now I can take this out as x squared plus 5x plus 4. Okay, now I have to minimize this a little bit here, so let me shrink this down. Okay, so now at this point, now we're going to factor this. Now this right here is simple. This is just a PS2 problem. Product is positive 4, and again, we remember how we know it's a PS2. My lead coefficient is 1. S is going to be positive 5. So the two numbers that do this are going to be positive. Yeah, that looks terrible. Eraser. There it is. All right, so we're going to go to positive 4 and positive 1. Okay, so x plus 4, x plus 1 is equal to 0, and we solve this. So x is going to equal to negative 4, x is going to equal to negative 1. So we have these two solutions, and don't forget about these ones. X also equals 3, and x also equals 2. Now again, one way to make sure that you have all your answers, remember I talked about it earlier, is the fundamental theorem of algebra. That says the lead exponent, the largest exponent you have, tells you how many answers you should have. Because my lead exponent is a 4, you should have 4 answers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right, let's move on. All right, let's take a look at this next one. Okay. So first thing we do, let's find all the possible zeros. We have that fun. So P and Q. So my P values are here, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3. Q values, plus or minus 1. Now this is going to be a nice problem to work with. So when I do this, all over 1, plus or minus, because my Q value is 1. And my P values are just plus or minus 1 and 3. So my possible factors, when I do this, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3. So kind of nice when it does that, because it definitely narrows down the hard work for you in the guessing game. Okay, so, all right, so let's shrink this down, and I'll move it up. And now let's get ready for our synthetic division. Okay, so here we go, let's erase this. Okay, so we start off, okay? Now I check for gaps, so 3, 2, and 0, no gaps, so I can just take the coefficients as they are. So 1, negative 3, negative 1, positive 3. All right, so let's get started. Let's do a little guessing here. So this time I'm gonna pick, let's say, positive 1. Looks nice. So I'm gonna bring down the 1. 1 times 1 is 1, so negative 2. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Add down, I get negative 3. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Add down, remainder is 0. Yay! That's what we want. And now I've got this thing, remainder, x0, x to the first, x squared. So this is what we want. We want into our square area. So let's shrink that again. I'm going to scooch. So let's take this out as x squared minus 2x minus 3. It's going to equal to 0. Okay, now we're going to do our PS2. Again, PS2 because the lead coefficient is 1. So product is negative 3. Sum is negative 2. So the two numbers that do this are going to be negative 3 and positive 1. So x minus 3, x plus 1 is equal to 0. And I'm going to shrink this a little bit so I can keep working. Scoot it up. Okay, so now we're going to solve this. So here x is going to equal to 3. X is going to equal to negative 1. And don't forget we had this answer from the synthetic. X is equal to 1. And using the fundamental theorem of algebra, we had an x cubed, and you should have 3 answers. So 1, 2, 3. And there's that one. All right, I'm going to let you have some fun with this one. I'm going to let you try this one on your own. I'm going to let the clock run, let the video run for about a minute or two, and then we'll get started. Now, so again, have some fun. Again, this won't be that bad, okay? All right, so let's see how you do. I'll give you about a minute, so I'll come back in about a minute, leave the video running, and have fun. Seeing how lengthy this problem is, I'm going to give you another minute. So keep the video going. I'll be back in a minute. Alrighty, let's have some fun with this one. Alright, so again, let's get our possible factors, our P and our Q. So our P, now again, 18, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 9, plus or minus 18. Q values are going to be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. Wow, this one's going to be super fun because we're going to have three fractions here. We have 1, we have it with the 2, and we have it with the 4. Okay, all right, so let's grab this. Okay. I'll move it over here, and I'm going to shrink that down so it fits on the line. And I'm going to do it again. Actually, I'll just grab these. It'll be easier than having to shrink it 3 times, huh? Got that one. And we got this one. Now this one I may have to shrink. There we go. Perfect. All right. So now, let's get all our factors here. Now, like I said, the one fraction easy. It's just repeating what we have. Plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 9, plus or minus 18. Okay, then we have the next fraction, plus or minus a half, plus or minus 2 over 2, which is 1. We already have that. So we have 3 over 2, plus or minus 6 over 2, which is 3. 9 over 2 is 9 halves. And 18 over 2 is just 9, so I don't have to do any more there. Then we have the 1/4, so plus or minus 1/4. 2/4 is a half, we already have it. 3/4, plus or minus 3/4. Okay, then we have 6/4, which is 3 halves. We already have it. We have 9/4, plus or minus 9 over 4. Then we have 18/4, which is 9 halves, which we already have. So this right here is all our possible factors here. All right, so now I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so we can work, have plenty of room. Now again, next thing we're going to check for gaps. So looking at my exponents, we go 4 to 3 to 2, 1, and 0. So we have no gaps, so let's fill in the chart. So 4, we have 12, we have negative 13, we have negative 45, and we have negative 18. All right. Yep. Oh, let me draw a dividing line in here. There it is. Okay. So let's start having some fun. Okay. So first thing I'm going to pick, let's go positive 2. I don't know. I'm in a positive 2 kind of mood today. Let's bring down the 4. 4 times 2 is 8. That gives me 20. 20 times 2 is 40. That gives me 27. 27 times 2 is 54. That gives me a 9. 9 times 2 is 18. Yippee! We got a remainder of 0. Awesome. But, like we said earlier, we are not where we need to be because I have 4 numbers here with the remainder. So that means we're in x cubed territory, which means we have to do all our possible factor stuff again. I know. All right, so let's shrink this down so we can do our possible factors. Okay. All right, so we got our p and our q again. So p, now again, our p this time is 9. So plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9. Q value sadly is still 4, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. All right, so let's do this up. Okay, let's get our P's and Q's. Okay, so we have our 3 lines again. 4, we have the 2, we have the 1, and this time our P's are just these guys. Okay, I want you to shrink. There you go. Okay, so we're just going to copy that 3 times. I know you have to write it out, I'm sorry. So now when we do it this time, okay, let's go back to our original list of possible factors, okay, and just cross off what we don't have anymore. So we have plus or minus 1, we have. Plus or minus 3, we have. Plus or minus 5. So we have, I guess I'll come up here. Plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9. Okay, then from the next one, we have plus or minus 1/2, plus or minus 3/2, plus or minus 5/2. I know, I'm kind of making a mess, I'm sorry. Oh, that wasn't even a 5, it's a 9. See, I'm not paying attention sometimes. It should be a 9. Okay, and then we have the fourths. We have plus or minus 1/4, plus or minus 3/4, plus or minus 9/4. Okay, so here's all our new possible factors. Now again, if you look at our original list of possible factors, we have the 1, the 2, the 3, but we don't have 6 anymore. So you can just kind of just go back into this and scribble out what you don't have anymore. We don't have 18. Okay, we still have 1/2. We have 3/2. We have 9/2. We have 1/4. We have 3/4 and 9/4. Okay, so the only factors we really lost were 6 and 18 from our original set. All right, so let's get rid of all this crap. All this down here. Come on, eraser. There we go. All right, so let's get rid of all this, all of this. Oops. And these other things I think I have to delete. Nope. Come on. Let's try this. There we go. That worked better. All right. So we're going to pick up the synthetic division, okay, where we left off. So we're going to pick it up right from here. This is not in it anymore. So again, let's take a look at another possible factor. Now this time, since we didn't have 2, I'm going to pick negative 3. Only because this video is starting to get long enough and I already know the answer. So 4, it's going to be negative 12, so 8. You're going to have negative 24, so it's going to be a 3. And you're going to have negative 9, so 0. Okay, so now we got it down to where we want it. So it's going to be 4x squared plus 8x plus 3 is equal to 0. And we now have to factor to solve this. Okay, so let me shrink this so we have more room. See how fun this is? So now we have to use a slide here. Multiply front to back, that's plus 12 plus. So our product is positive 12, the sum is positive 8. So the two numbers that do this are going to be positive 6 and positive 2. So we're going to have x plus 6 and x plus 2. But don't forget, since we did the slide, you have to divide. Now I'm going to reduce these, but again, remember, reducing does not, because I'm solving this, I'm not going to do the scooch part of the slide here. I'm just going to reduce it. So x plus 3 halves, x plus 1 half. And now we solve this. So x is going to equal negative 3 halves. X is going to equal to negative 1 half. And then I drag these answers down. X also equals negative 3. X also equals to positive 2. See? That wasn't too bad. All right, I'll let you try this next one. I'll give you about a minute or so to get started, get a little ahead of me, and in a minute or so, I will come back and we'll start talking about this one. Leave the video running. I will come back to you. Alrighty, people, I'm back. Alright, so I'm going to start working a little bit faster so you're not watching a 4-hour-long video on how to do this. Alright, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9. My Q values are 6, so plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6. So it's kind of fun when the denominator is going to have more values than the numerator. So we're going to have 4 fractions here. All right, so we have it when it's 1, when it's 2, when it's 3, and 6. And I'll grab this. All right, shrink that down. Okay. And again, like I said, I'm sorry you have to write these out by hand, but them's are the breaks sometimes. All right, so I already have to shrink this because... All right, so here we go. Our possible factors. So start with the ones. So we're going to have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9. Then we have the fractions, plus or minus 1/2, plus or minus 3 halves, plus or minus 9 halves. Then we come here, plus or minus 1/3. 3 over 3 is 1, I already have it. 9 over 3 is 3, so I don't have to list those. Next one, 1 over 6 is 1/6. 3 over 6 is 1/2, I already have that. 9 over 6 reduces to 3 halves, I already have that. All right, here's my possible factors. All right, so now let's get ready. Now checking for my gaps, there aren't any because my exponents goes 3, 2, 1, 0. So now let's start. Get the coefficients of 6, -11. We have -24, and we have 9. Okay, now at this fun point, again, I already know the answer, so I'm going to go right to what I already know is going to work because, again, this video is probably long enough as it is already. So again, one of the factors that's going to work for us in this case is going to be +3. This is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. Add down, we get a 7. 7 times 3 is 21. So we add those together, we get -3. 3 and -3 is -9, which gives me a 0. Perfect. And now it's where it needs to be. It's in our squared range. All right, so let's take this out. So we're going to have 6x squared plus 7x minus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, now we have to factor using the slide. That's going to be -18. So our product, -18. The sum is +7. Whoops, forgot the minus on the 18. So the two numbers that do this are going to be obviously +9. Actually, no, it's not. I lied. And you can tell I'm making a lot of silly mistakes now because the sum is not 2. I'm trying to think ahead of myself. The sum was actually 7, isn't it? So the two numbers that do this are going to be +9 and -2. That makes more sense, now doesn't it? All right, so let me shrink this down so we can work. Okay, so we're going to have x plus 9 and 9 and x minus 2. Okay, and that's an awful looking 9. So let's do this. Let's fix that, make that a nice 9. There, that's better. Now, don't forget though, because since we did the slide, we have to divide by 6. So we're going to have x plus 3 halves, x minus 1/3. So when I solve this, x is equal to -3 halves, x is equal to 1/3, and then don't forget our other guy from the beginning, that x is also equal to 3. And there's that one, piece of cake. All right, folks, here's another fun and exciting one. I'm going to let you try on your own. Now realize since it's x to the 5th, you're going to have to do synthetic division 2 or 3 times to get it down to the x squareds on this one. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the video run. Okay, I'll give you about 2 minutes to work on this, and then afterwards I will come back and we will talk about this one. Good luck! Alrighty, folks, your 2 minutes are up. All right, so let's start. First thing we need to do, let's get our P's and Q's. So P is back here. So factors of 12 are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, and plus or minus 12. Okay, now our Q's, now because it's 6, you have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, and plus or minus 6. All right, now we got 4 factors this time, so we're going to need 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have a 1, 2, 3, 6 on the bottom. All right, for our tops, here we go. I'm just going to copy this because I can. Oh, kind of cut off the 12 a little bit there. I don't like that. Let's see, where's the delete option? There it is. Let's get rid of that. That was a lousy one. Let's try that again. There we go. That's better. So I'll drag this down. We'll shrink it. Okay, and then we'll just we'll do this 4 times. Here's that one. There's that one. And we do it one more time. All right, so here we go. Let's go list our possible factors. Okay, so from our 1s, we have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 12. And I should have threw commas in between here. Separate them. Okay, now for the fractions. Plus or minus, we have 1/2. Plus or minus 2 halves is 1. Then we have the 3 halves, so 3 over 2. And we have 4 halves, which is just 2. So then we have 6 halves, which is just 3, which we have, and 12 halves, which is 6, which we also have. So this all set there. So let's go here. 1/3. So we have a 1/3. Third. That was a lousy one. Plus or minus 2/3. Plus or minus, we have 3/3, which is 1. We have that. And then we have 4/3. Okay, I'm going to bring this down here a little bit. Plus or minus. Then we have 6/3, which is 2. 12/3, which is 4. So we have those. So that's all set. Now we have the 6's. We have plus or minus 1/6. Plus or minus, we have 2/6, which is a 1/3, which we already have. 3/6, which is a 1/2, we already have. 4/6 is 2/3, we already have. 6/6 is 1, we already have. And 12/6 is 2. So there we go. So I didn't really even need that. Where's my eraser? There it is. Let's just get rid of this real quick. All right. So my possible factors are all this. Doesn't this look exciting? All right, so now I'm going to have to shrink this quite a bit. So, and I'm going to kind of scooch it over here this time. Okay. Now, so we check our gaps. So looking at my exponents, we go from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 to a constant. So we're good. So let's get our coefficients. Okay, so we're going to have our box. We have a 6. We have a 13, hey, 13, there you go. We have a negative 38. We have a negative 49. We have a 56. And we have negative 12. I'm going to have to shrink this a little bit again. Now, like I said, I'm going to just grab the answers for you guys. I hope you're good at guessing. Otherwise, you know, it is the way it is. I was awful at guessing, so it always took me forever to do this. But all right, so we're going to start off. One of the factors is going to be a 2. So I'm going to bring down the 6. So 2 times 6 is 12. we get 25. 2 times 25 is 50. So I now have 12. 12 times 2 is 24. Add down, that's going to be negative 25. Times that, I get negative 50. So that's 6. And 2 times 6 is going to be 12. When we add it down, we get a 0. Alright, so there's one of them. I'm going to have to shrink and scooch. Now, unfortunately for us, again, we are nowhere near having just 3 pieces in a remainder. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces in a remainder. So we have to do our P's and Q's again, try to narrow this field down again. Probability plus or probability, but our P value is going to be 1 plus or minus 2 plus or minus 3 plus or minus 6. And our Q value is going to be the same, plus or minus 1 plus or minus 2 plus or minus 3 and plus or minus 6. Oh boy, I'll shrink this some more. Alright, so we're going to scooch this up. I want to keep the possible factors in line here because again, we're just going to pick off what we have. Okay, so let's do our possible factors. Need 4 lines again. 1, 2, 3, 6. And we're going to copy the top. Bring it over and shrink it. I need to shrink it some more. All right, there's that one. That one. That one. So again, what we're going to do after we do all this fun stuff is again, we're going to get our possible factors and then go back to our original list and start canceling off things that no longer apply here. Okay, so here we go. So from our ones, we're going to have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6, plus or minus a half, because we're now in the halves. 2 over 2 is 1. We have plus or minus 3 halves. 6 over 2 is 3. We already have it. Here we're going to go to 1/3, so plus or minus 1/3. Plus or minus 2/3. 3/3 is 1. 6/3 is 2. So we already have those. Then we have 1/6, so plus or minus 1/6. 2/6 is 1/3. 3/6 is a half. 6/6 is 1. All right. So here's our new list. So let's go back to our original list way up here. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. We don't have 4 anymore, so we can cancel that. It's not in our list anymore, so you can kind of scribble it out. We still have 6, but we don't have 12, so we can get rid of 12. Okay, we have 1/2 and 3 halves. We have 1/3, 2/3. We don't have 4/3 anymore. So that goes out. And then we have 1/6. So again, we narrowed our list down a little bit here. That looks very interesting. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. So now that I got that, I'm going to erase all the fun work we just did here. Okay, because now that I have my list of factors up there, I really don't need to have this twice. All right, so here we go. Let me get rid of all this. Yep, just bear with me. You can take a break, breathe. Again, this is just going to be, it's going to be just fine. You'll see. It's just a lot of aggravating work. Okay. All right, so here we go. All right. So now, we are ready for the next step. So, in this case, I'm going to put a -2 in the box again because I know what the answer is. Otherwise, you're going to have to guess and check with the factors you now have to work with. So we bring this down. So it's going to be 6. -2 times 6 is -12. So that's going to give me a 13. -2 times 13 is -26. So that's going to be a -14. -2 times -14 is +28, which gives me a 3. And -2 times 3 is -6, so it gives me a remainder of 0. Wonderful. But we're still not where we need to be because we have 4 pieces and a remainder. We need to have 3 pieces and a remainder. So sadly, we have to do our P's and Q's again. So P and Q. Probability. Now, nicely enough, our P value is 3, so it's plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3. Our Q value hasn't changed, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, and plus or minus 6. All right, so let's do this up. Okay, I'm going to see if I can scooch this a smidge. No, it's just going to move everything here. So that's no good. Okay. Maybe I can circle it here or something. Okay. Actually, what's this do? I'll play with it later. Let's see. I just want to move this. Oh, yeah, there we go. So then I can get rid of this other one. So I have some room to work. So as you can see, a lot of fun work here. Okay, so here we go. So we have our 4 lines again. 1 with 1, 1 with 2, 1 with 3, 1 with 6. I'm just going to write it this time. I'll be like you guys. I'll write it. 1 and 3, 1 and 3. All right, so here we go. Let's get our possible factors here. Actually, let me shrink this down again a smidge. I know, look how far we've come already. All right, so here we go. We're going to have plus, oops. Here we go. So, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 1/2, plus or minus 3/2, plus or minus 1/3. 3 over 3 is 1. We have plus or minus 1/6, and then we have a half here. So now going back to my list, we have 1, we can get rid of 2. So we can get rid of 2. Okay, we still have 3. We don't have 6 anymore, so we can get rid of 6. Okay, we still have a half. We still have 3 halves. We still have a third, but we don't have 2/3 anymore, so that can go away. And we still have a 1/6. All right, so we have these pieces left. Now again, nicely enough for us, we only have to do synthetic division one more time, and then we can go back to normal factoring. Bet you guys never thought you'd hear the day where you're praying for regular factoring, huh? All right, so let's clear all this fun stuff. La 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 la. Do. Come on. Let's see. That's pretty good. All right, so let's get back into it. Okay, I'm going to go to red this time, I guess. Okay, so now this time, like I said, I know the answer. So we are going to go to, let's go to -3. All right, let's bring this down. We got the 6. That's going to be -18, which gives me a -5. -3 and -5 is +15, so it is 1. And that's going to be -3, which is 0. Yay. And guess what? We finally have this thing to where we want it. So it's going to be 6x squared minus 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. And we now factor this. Now, sadly, again, now you're going to have to use a slide, so it's +6. Product is +6. The sum is going to be -5. So your two numbers that do this are going to be -6 and +1. Okay. So now I got to shrink this a little bit more so we have more room to work. Look at that. Look how small it's gotten. Okay, so I got to put the pen. Okay, so we're going to have x minus 6. We're going to have x plus 1 equaling to 0. But don't forget, since you did the slide, we have to divide. So we're going to have x minus 1 and x plus 1/6 is equal to 0. So solving, x equals 1. X equals -1/6. So there's 2. Now don't forget these other ones up here. X equaled -3. And don't forget this one that said X equaled -2. And don't forget this one right here that said X is equal to +2. Now remember, our lead term, our lead coefficient was a 5. Our lead exponent, sorry, not coefficient, our exponent. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's that piece of cake. Tough one though, but a lot of fun. All right, last one up. This one will be really fun. So I'll give you about 1.5 minutes to try this one. You're going to see when you do your possible factors, it's not going to be very tricky on this one. So I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes to try it, and then we'll come in and do this thing up. All right? So leave the video running, and I will come back to you in about 1 minute. Alrighty, here we go. Now, as you probably figured out when we did our possible factors here, our P and Q, our P is ±1, our Q ±1. So when we do this out, our P over Q, we're just going to have 1, and it's 1. So our possible factors are plus and minus 1. So that makes it really nice for us. Okay. All right, so let me clear all this garbage out, because we only have one factor to play with. So I don't even have to shrink this time. And I'm going to move this. Oh, hey. No, it's not going to let me move it. Okay, fine, whatever. All right, so let's get started with our synthetic division, because that's going to be the hardest part about all this. Checking for gaps. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. No gaps. So we're going to have, here's our box. We're going to have 1, 1, -3, -3, +3, +3, -1, -1. All right, so you only got 2 things to pick from here. So let's use +1 to start. All right, so here we go. Let's do this. 1 times 1 is 1, so that's 2. 1 times 2 is 2, so -1. 1 times -1 is -1, so -4. 1 times -4 is -4, so that's -1. 1 times -1 is -1, so that's 2. 1 times 2 is 2, so that's 1. And 1 times 1 is 1, so 0. There's remainder number 1. Now again, you could check for your possible factors, but again, notice how we started with 1 and 1. And that really won't change all that much, but you should check. Again, we got a 1 here, we got a 1 here. So again, we're not going to see too much of a shift or a move here. So I'm going to just shrink this, move this up a smidge. All right, so let's go at it again. Okay, change the color. So again, we have the choice of positive or -1. So I'm going to do +1 again. Let's ride the +1 train for a while and see where it takes us. So we're going to go to 1. 1 times 1 is 1, so that's a 3. 1 times 3 is 3, so that's a 2. 1 times 2 is 2, so -2. 1 times -2 is -2, so that's -3. 1 times -3 is -3, so that's negative 1. And 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, so that gives us 0 again. Perfect. Now again, we go to check, because we should check our possible factors here, but again, we got a 1 and a 1. So our possible factors did not change again. So let's just keep going at this and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to put positive 1 in again. So we have a 1. 1 times 1 is 1, so 4. 1 times, let me fix that. That's an awful looking 4. I need to fix that. Yeah, there we go. So that's a 4. 1 times 4 is 4. That gives me a 6. 1 times 6 is 6. That's going to give me a 4. 1 times 4 is 4. That's going to give me a 1. 1 times 1 is 1. That's going to give me a 0. Perfect. Now, we're still going here. Okay. But, and again, checking my possible factors. Okay, I still have a 1 and a 1. But notice this time, all my numbers here are positive, which means if I use a positive 1 in there, I'm never going to get 0 in the end because I need it to subtract. So that's kind of like my sign that all the positive ones are now gone. So that means negative 1 is probably going to take me the rest of the way. Okay, so here we go. Let's bring down the 1. 1 times 1 is 1, so it's going to be a 5. 1 times negative, oh wait a minute. No, it's not. It's negative 1. See, you guys gotta trying to warn you about stuff, and I make some silly mistake like that. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, so that's a 3. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3, so that brings me to 3. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3, that brings me to a 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, which gives me 0. Perfect. And now notice how, again, all my numbers left over are just positive, which means that's a sign we're dealing with a negative 1 again as my box number. And I should have changed the colors for you. I can fix that real quick. There we go. All right, so let's go to negative 1. All right, so here we go. Bring the 1 over. So that's going to be negative 1, so 2. It's going to be negative 2, so 1. It's going to be negative 1, so 0. Okay. All right, so now we got this thing where we want it, but in an instance like this, see how easy it's been to get it down to the square by using 1 or negative 1? We could probably just finish it off right here, do negative 1 more time. Now you can take it out and factor it. It'll just be x squared plus 2x plus 1. Okay, but sometimes when you got it this good, you might as well just take it all the way to the end. So here we go, we got the 1. It's going to be negative 1, so 1. Negative 1, so 0. But just realize what we have now. Okay, this is my remainder. This is x0, which are constant. This is x to the first. So this, when I take it out, just says x plus 1 is equal to 0. And we solve it. So x is equal to negative 1. So there's one of my answers. Now, then we have another x minus 1. So we have x equals negative 1 again. And again, x equals negative 1. And again, oh, we already did that one. So then we got this one. X equals negative 1. Then we have all these positive ones. X is equal to 1. X is equal to 1. X is equal to 1. Now again, we should have 7 answers because our lead exponent was 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there's that one. Alright, so finally we're at the end of this tutorial video. So again, hopefully you've learned a lot and got through the joys that is by finding the real zeros. So again, good luck out there, have fun, and I'll see you next time.